Welcome to today's webinar on OnBase System Administration Tips and Tricks for 2020. Now, as far as our agenda goes today, fairly straightforward. We're first going to be covering the tasks that your OnBase System Administrator should be familiar with and outline some key points and importances of these tasks. And then we'll turn our focus to the changes System Administrators should be aware of within Hyland's new OnBase Foundation solution. Specifically talking about the changes with the diagnostics console and service and distribution services. All right, so let's get started here and kick things off with our daily tasks that your OnBase administrator should be aware of. So this slide right here is a list of tasks that your OnBase administrator should be looking at on a daily basis in order to ensure you're getting the most out of your solution. Now, depending on the size and scope of your organization, you may have anywhere from a team of dedicated OnBase administrators or just one or two IT employees taking on your administrative roles for OnBase. Now, whatever that is, these tasks we'll be covering today can be scaled to best meet your needs. And two of the biggest takeaways from these daily tasks is one, to familiarize yourself with the system and its normal functions and processes. And then two, to head off any issues before they become a problem by identifying early warning signs. And whether or not some of these tasks need to be completed daily would be based on how you use OnBase and how busy your solution is. So let's take a closer look at a couple of these. So confirming successful transaction logs and database backups. Through your normal maintenance plan, you should have a full backup of the OnBase database on a daily basis. For SQL databases, you can check this with the SQL Management Studio, checking in within job history. Otherwise, you can simply browse out to the backup location path and verify that the files have been created. Testing here is key, so you do want to take the backup, restore it to a test copy, and ensure that you can log in and actually retrieve the data from the system. And this really touches on my point earlier of discovering the small issues before they become major problems. Also, as I mentioned earlier, all these tasks are scalable to your own needs, and it's definitely recommended that these tasks be incorporated into your administrative tasks with your DBA team. And it's also, this task is a key into your disaster recovery plan. And every system administrator should know the disaster recovery plan and especially how it relates to OnBase. Our next task here is checking import source directories. Simple task that we recommend to incorporate into the OnBase administrator's daily routine. This is a verification that all files within the import folder have been ingested into your solution. And checking any of these files that may exist within the error folder. I'm sure most of you are familiar with these types of import folders, but for those that are not, what I'm referring to here is when your OnBase solution has been configured for an automated import process. A folder will be designed as a point of entry for files into OnBase. The folder, in conjunction with a timer within OnBase that has been configured to sweep all the files located in that folder and then bring them into your solution. Now, files can end up in this folder through various methods, including the third-party applications that can be configured to, drop documents and index files into this location, or just servers dropping log files to the folder, and simply users dragging and dropping files to the folder. Now, you can simply browse out to that import folder and check and clean up any files that end up in the error folder. Now, I have to look at these directories, you can use the configuration and check each import document, through the either the document import process, directory import processor, and so on. And for this demonstration, we're going to use the document import processor. And within this specific import, within the settings, you can view the default directory and then simply browse out to that network path. And once there's two important things that we want to check here: the error files and any stale files. There shouldn't be anything in the error files. In this example, we do actually have two files that didn't exist when the process ran. And there are a few reasons that the index file can end up here. The index file itself has bad data, or the file the index is referencing did not exist at the time of import. And then checking any potential stale files. Once OnBase can set up to delete the source files from this directory to help in identifying the items that need to be imported yet. And then this is done under the process settings. So if there are still files sitting in the import directory, your admins can begin to investigate why they failed to import. Main reasons as why they end up with the stale files would be bad or non-existent index files. Next task we're going to look at here is verification reports. Now, a verification report is generated every time any import process occurs within your solution. An easy way to line up a verification report to its appropriate batch is to view these reports right from batch processing. But for an overall look at these reports, document retrieval can be leveraged as well. Depending on the size of your solution, having your OnBase administrators go in and check every verification report may not be feasible, but once again, performing this task will familiarize your admins with all the processes that are running in your solution. And they can also perform spot checks and be able to know that viewing these reports can be step one of troubleshooting any issue with an import process. And moving right along here, we'd like to touch on another report that can be run in OnBase, the unidentified items. Any document type that begins with sys or sys are default document types within OnBase. The sys unidentified items document type is OnBase's version of unexpected items in the baggage claim area, basically. These items or documents have not received proper indexing, and this is a fast and easy way to check if any documents have been incorrectly indexed. And all you have to do is just browse out to the document retrieval using your preferred client and perform a document retrieval for any sys unidentified items. Now, obviously there shouldn't be any in there, but if there are, those would need to be seen too. Next daily task we're going to look at here is checking your Windows Event Viewer logs. Now, earlier I mentioned an important takeaway of these administrative tasks is to have your OnBase administrators get familiar with your solution. And checking the Windows Event Viewer logs really emphasizes that statement. It's one of those check it out and get familiar with sort of tasks. There's a lot of information within the Windows Event Viewer logs, and not all is relevant. So get used to seeing some of the warnings and errors that occur on a daily basis. So when you are troubleshooting an issue, anything unusual will stand out. And also important to follow up on any errors that are not OnBase related to ensure that you have a healthy server. And even though these administrative tasks are geared toward the application itself, you'll see some of them touch on the overall network related functions. And just remember that the software is only as good as the network and hardware it's running on. So we have a short video here walking through the Windows Event Viewer. And I just want to highlight that there's just a lot of information within the Event Viewer. But for your OnBase administrators, there's 4 areas that they should get familiar with. In the Windows logs, it's the application and system logs. And then on our server side, it's the Hyland and OnBase logs. And as you can see, there are errors that are being thrown. And when I navigate to the OnBase logs, you can see some of these errors that are generated while we're doing some testing within this solution. But again, the application, system, Hyland, and OnBase logs are the ones that you'll really want to focus on when troubleshooting any issue related to OnBase. Next task here, very straightforward, checking documents and processing locks. Have a routine of getting in and looking to see if and how many locks are applied to any documents. Now, a document lock isn't necessarily a bad thing. As you'll see, locks applied to documents anytime a user is working on it, and this just ensures that only one user can edit the item at a given time. What your administrators really need to be looking for here are if there are any locks that have been maintained on a document longer than 24 hours. And having this task fall either into the beginning or end of the day just makes that check much more simple. Now let's we'll do a video here to look at this, how to view these locks. So we're in the Fit client, and if you simply just browse out to Administrator, Utils, and Document Lock Administration, Here we'll see the locks that are currently applied to the document within your solution. And you can refresh this dialog window to get updated data. And then obviously once you've identified any locks that you want to remove, you can control or shift click any number of locks and then right click remove selected. Typically you'll be performing this task when end users report locks on desired documents. Other lock types include processing locks and batch locks. And now these types of locks typically occur when users are either working on a document or in the middle of a process and OnBase closes unexpectedly. All right, moving along here. Next on our list is monitoring scan queues. This is another task that can be performed within batch processing and checking these queues to ensure that documents are basically flowing through the process and checking to see how many uncommitted batches exist. You want to ensure that someone is monitoring these image queues, and this can prevent huge backlogs of batches that need to be committed. And also another way to prevent backlogging would be to schedule commits in your process. And our last daily task we're going to touch on here is IIS resets. Both Hyland and Naviant strongly recommend incorporating a nightly IIS reset into your solution. And this is because the app servers create a cache file every time it starts up, which is a quick read of the information within the database. And this speeds up the retrieval process of the data for the end users. So an IIS reset recreates that cache file from the database. And this just ensures that your users are able to view the most up-to-date and accurate representation of the information contained in the database. And also this clears up any hung up user connections as well, which can minimize administrator action needed in the future. All right, guys, next up, we're going to cover the tasks that you should be taking care of on a weekly basis within your solution. As you can see from this list, once again, we have the confirmation of those backup files. And some other highlights that we're going to go through are the performance matrix, removal of old user connections, and database and document maintenance. So let's get into these. All right, so capturing performance matrices. Now, as I stated earlier, some of these tasks involve a more broader picture rather than strictly within the software itself. So capturing the CPU usage or processor memory on each server can give your administrators a unique insight in the overall health, overall solution's health. And these matrices should be captured at various times throughout the day to establish when your peak usage is occurring. A weekly capture of these matrices will establish a baseline of what your system looks like operating at normal capacity and can then be leveraged for troubleshooting purposes. So having a good understanding of your baselines will allow your administrators to identify any degradation in your system's health and overall performance. And just another small note is also to check your overall disk space and make sure that that's never exceeding 90%. Next weekly task we're going to touch on here is database maintenance. Your organization should have an established database maintenance plan. With OnBase, this maintenance plan needs to include updated statistics, reorganizing indexes, and ensuring that shrinking of the database isn't a part of the plan. Now, depending on the size of your organization, you may not have a dedicated database administrator, and that's when your OnBase administrators become what we like to call accidental DBAs. But have no fear, however, Hyland does provide some great resources, including database reference guides and step-by-step walkthroughs for any OnBase related database task that needs to be performed. And they also include recommendations for maintenance within your solution. So continuing on with document maintenance here, any OnBase user that has the delete privilege is able to highlight and delete documents within OnBase. And however, the term delete in OnBase has a slightly different definition. When a user deletes, they actually send the document to document maintenance. And we can think of document maintenance as OnBase's recycling bin. Those documents still exist within the database and disk groups when they're in document maintenance or the recycling bin. It isn't until these documents are purged that they're truly removed from the database. And you can view all documents that have been deleted by navigating to document maintenance. And from there, your OnBase system administrators can actually purge these deleted items or even undelete and put them back into circulation. Okay, another weekly task we'll be covering here and that we'd like your OnBase administrators to do on a weekly basis is go in and check connected users and remove any old connections. Now, nightly IIS resets, if that is in place with your organization, will remove any user connections to the application server. So any admin interaction would be rather minimal, but it is still important to view and ensure that there are no stale or hung connections out there. And one thing also to note on this, service accounts will be connected for weeks at a time, and this is normal, and unless your services are getting reset as part of your maintenance plan. So I have a short video here of how to view current users. And so to view current users, we just simply navigate to, this is in the thick client, we go to admin, user management, and then view current users. And in this example, you can see that the manager is twice on here, once for the client login and once for the DIP license. And then for test user 2 and 3 here, they're logged in under separate remote sessions to the server, which is why I guess the workstation name is the same in this case. Normally that wouldn't be the case and each user would have their own workstation. And then also you can click refresh to view any new users as well and get updated data. And last up on our weekly checklist is to stay current on all things OnBase and familiarize yourself with Hyland's OnBase community page. If you've never visited the community page before, you're missing out. It's one of those one-stop shop for all things OnBase, including blogs, news, upcoming events, troubleshooting, discussions, and so much more. So it's a very great resource to check out and stay current on all things OnBase. Okay, so let's now take a look at our monthly tasks. So here's the lineup for our monthly tasks. It does actually look like a lot, but in reality, we're going to spend more time talking about them today than they'll actually take to accomplish. So let's dive right in here. Depending on the size and scope of your system, monthly purges can either have a minimal impact or can drastically improve your speed of the database queries and improve system performance for your end users. Now, the transaction logs are really the history of each document. OnBase can be leveraged to show a true audit trail of each document within your solution, with additional lines being added each time a user opens the document or at each stop the document takes moving through your process. And so as you can imagine, having that level of detail on each of thousands of documents within your solution can really start to add up if it isn't accounted for within your maintenance plan. Now, different organizations will have different requirements for how long these types of records need to be maintained. OnBase is able to set different retention requirements per document type as well, enabling you to easily incorporate any of your business unique requirements to your document retention plan. That being said, these types of log purges actually create a system document that still contains all the data, just in a more compressed format. So the data still remains revertible if needed. And then also, once again, these tasks are scalable, so just ensure that this is occurring on a regular schedule and is aligning with your retention plan. So we're gonna play this video in a little bit here. This video, we're gonna go look at purging the transaction workflow and or scan logs. And as I mentioned, when performing these types of purges in a system document is created. And the purges will remove the data from the database and pull the data into a text file. This is a completely manual process and cannot be scheduled by design. So moving old log files from the database into a text file can give you more space in the database and potentially speed up your system without losing any of that history. So pretty simple. Within the Thick client here, you just go to the admin menu and you'll select the desired log that you want. And then using the interface, you can define the parameters of your purge and purge. All right, so now confirming successfully monthly backups. Once again, we do have that task of confirming that your backups are viable and can be used. Having backups without testing them on some sort of scheduled basis puts your organization at risk that could otherwise be easily avoided. So it's always good to go in, verify you have the ability to restore files from the backups you have created. Next, we'll briefly discuss server maintenance. Now, as I stated earlier, some of these factors, these system administration tasks incorporate factors outside the software itself. So having server reboots incorporated into your maintenance plan is strongly recommended. This ensures that any and all temporary cache locations are being reset. And also it's good to note Microsoft servers should be patched monthly. And it's definitely best practice to implement any patches or updates to your system's test environment and ensure that there's no issues introduced into your system before applying these updates and patches to the production server. Very simple task, yet an important one, is to run all system configuration reports on a monthly basis. Now, this is done in the configuration module under reports, run all reports. And these reports provide a plethora of data that can be leveraged to make decisions within your OnBase solution. Some examples would be how many document types are configured in your solution, how many keywords, user groups, and so much more. Next monthly task we're going to take a look at is reviewing security groups and access. Now this task I'm going to briefly demonstrate and show you how to pull the data needed to answer the following questions. Do your users have access to the documents they shouldn't? And are your user groups configured efficiently? Now I first want to note this task is a formalized method of presenting data in an easy to read document to your organization's decision makers. And I also want to make note that this task is incorporated in both the basic and comprehensive audit that Naviant can perform, in that a free basic audit of your solution is included with all our customers who take advantage of our service level agreement with Naviant. And if you're looking for a free basic audit or more information on that, you can email us at support@naviant.com. So now we've got a video here about reviewing the access rights and answering those questions from the previous slide. So reviewing access rights can be done one of two ways. You can use the configuration and go through each user group and check each rights individually, such as product rights, privileges, etc. However, this can take quite a while, as you guys can imagine, if you have multiple user groups to review. So you can also use the configuration report to see what user groups have access to. And these reports, once again, can be found via document retrieval. So within the system documents, sysconfiguration reports, the report we need here is the user group configuration report. And as you can see from this, it does display the user groups and all their rights. All right, and then the last monthly task on our checklist here is to visit training.onbase.com. This task is definitely not limited to your OnBase administrators though. This is a great tool to be leveraged to get your end users trained on modules that you use within your solution. I myself have spent hours and hours on this site. There's a lot of learning paths that are specific to what your role is with OnBase, and they have set progressive videos and training modules that can build on your growing knowledge of OnBase. So definitely worth checking out and utilizing. Okay, so now we're going to move on to our annual administration tasks here. So most of these annual tasks involve ensuring that your maintenance plans and disaster recovery plans are still relevant. It's important to review these plans on an annual basis to ensure that you're still encompassing your organization's current needs and also reviewing your solution as it currently stands and seeing if there's any areas for improvement. Which I mentioned before would include a OnBase system audit. These audits can actually be customized to focus in on a particular area or department within your solution as well. And of course, we have to attend the Naviant annual summit. Our summit is a 2-day educational event, focuses on customer case studies, breakout sessions, industry roundtable discussions, hands-on training opportunities, and so much more. The team that really puts this together does a fantastic job, and I'd highly recommend attending. Okay, so let's get into some of our annual tasks here. First one being, we're going to briefly discuss workflow and the workflow doctor. So the workflow doctor results can be viewed outside of OnBase Studio within OnBase configuration. If any changes have been made to your workflow life cycles or any life cycles have been deleted, your solution may contain orphaned items. And so these are items that are residing in a life cycle that no longer exists and can cause some unique issues if they find themselves without a home. So in this video here, we're briefly going to go over the workflow doctor and configuration here. There's two options, the report issues and fix system issues. Right now we're selecting the report issues options, and this configuration allows you to get reports of configuration issues within your workflow that you may be having. And as you can see, when we bring up this report, if you look kind of to the bottom right there, it does address some issues with this AP invoice processing workflow. And so this is really handy to identify issues that your workflow may be having. And now for our other option here, the fix system errors. And this one's a great tool. It allows you to remove actions or task lists that are no longer in your workflow and that have been orphaned in the database. So really a great tool to identify orphaned items. Next up, removing old user and workstations. One of the key things we want to highlight in these annual tasks is going to be removing old workstations. Most of your OnBase licensing is handled at a workstation level. And if a change has been made to a workstation, OnBase will register it as a new and may not even release the licenses applied to the previous workstation. It's important for your OnBase system administrators to review your registered workstations and ensure that your licensing is made available. Now, to view current workstation registration, you'll simply navigate into the THIC client, admin, user management, workstation registration. OnBase uses machine IDs to determine workstation uniqueness, with a fallback of MAC address if the machine ID fails. Now, if this ID changes or the MAC address has to be used, OnBase will read the workstation to this workstation display. This can cause what looks like duplicate workstations, and because OnBase sees these as two separate workstations, none of the licenses move over, and then they need to be manually re-registered. All right, so now that we've covered the daily, monthly, and annual tasks your OnBase system administrator should be familiar with, we're going to shift gears here and now talk about changes your OnBase system administrator should be aware of for Hyland's new OnBase Foundation solution, primarily talking about the changes to the Diagnostics Console and distribution services. So as many of us know, the Diagnostic Service and Diagnostic Console obtain and log information that technical support groups can use to diagnose and troubleshoot issues within the OnBase applications. We will first review how the Diagnostic Console works in version 18 of OnBase and below, and then talk about the changes that have happened in Foundation. So in version 18 and prior, configuration is done within the web.config file, default file path being on the app server folder. Now to log information to file, the diagnostics version 18 and prior, mail slots must be enabled within the web.config file. The default file path listed on this slide, as well as the configuration of what the configuration of the mail slots looks like. If you simply set these mail slots to true, this will enable logging to file. And you can then filter what tabs you would like to view within the Diagnostics Console application by clicking the tabs at the top and checking the ones you'd like. All right, now let's take a look at a few major changes to the Diagnostics Console in service for Foundation. So first, the Foundation version of the Diagnostics Console is no longer backward compatible with version 18 and earlier, meaning that you will have to uninstall any older versions of the Diagnostic Console. Now, this will likely not affect many users, but it is worth keeping in mind. Now, upon initial installation of the Diagnostics Console, it is set to set up in local mode. This means that it will only run on the server it is installed on. So if you need access to the Diagnostic Console from a different machine, the bind IP setting needs to be changed to allow users to view the console without being on the server. Configuring for remote access is now done via an app.json file in the Hyland service folder. And another major change is that there's no longer mail slots to enable. Instead, Hyland.logging must be enabled, which can be found in the .config file of the .NET-based applications, such as the application server and web server. Similar to mail slots, different profile logs certain information and must include the include profiles key in order to see the messages within the Diagnostics Console. So if you look at this slide, in this example, we have the database, workflow, and file profiles have been turned on. You can also use the key exclude profiles instead of include to reverse this previous logic and log all profiles except the ones listed in the values. So definitely a few changes to note with the Diagnostics Console when comparing Foundation with prior OnBase solutions. All right, so now we're gonna talk about the distribution services for version 18 and prior. Now, the distribution service is a core service component that integrates with several OnBase modules and allowing email notifications to be sent through a centralized mail service. Now, in order for these notifications to be sent using the Hyland distribution service, the Use Email Distribution Service for Automated Email Global Client setting must be selected. And this is done simply within the configuration module under Users Global Client Settings. And also to run scheduled processes, you need to have the -SCHED or schedule command line switch on the processing workstation in order for scheduled processes to be executed at configured time. So now for the changes to the distribution service in Foundation. Now, beginning in Foundation EP1, there's actually no longer a separate installer for the distribution services. It has been rolled into the Unity scheduler. And this means that emailing sending tasks will need to be created in order for notifications to be sent from the workflow. Existing instances of the distribution service will need to be uninstalled as they are no longer needed. You can use the Diagnostics Console to troubleshoot distribution service issues. Diagnostics information is logged under the Timer Distribution Service tab in the Diagnostics Console. And any warnings and errors will go to the Warnings tab. And last thing to note, in previous versions of OnBase, the path and enable file configuration setting were used to log events to file. The preferred method for logging events to a file now in Foundation is using service logs created by the Diagnostics service. So as you can see, important changes to note here with the distribution services being rolled into the Unity scheduler. All right, so we have covered all the information here in this webinar. We're now going to open up to any questions that you may have about system administration in OnBase. And while you're thinking of those questions, I do just want to thank you guys all for attending this month's webinar, and we hope to see you in the next one. So thank you.